let's make a small introduction to law of air and law of outer space. But first a question. Why should international relations students learn about law of space or air? If astronauts start a fight, if a baby is born on International Space Station, and so on. I received such questions, by the way. What happens with the nationality of the baby if it's born on ISS? Now you know that there is no world or universal citizenship. So father's, mother's nationality. And what if crime happens on ISS? You can already answer it. They still carry the nationalities. Therefore, either universal jurisdiction, depending upon what has happened there, or one of those nationalities assume the right for jurisdiction. The most important thing is that, first of all, there are numerous satellites around orbiting. So what if one of them gives harm to another satellite? They cost much, you know? So then you have to be knowledgeable about state responsibility in outer space, for instance. And related to law of air, well, most of us are from Turkey. Imagine that was the very beginning of the Syrian crisis. An airplane had started from Moscow. It was flying to Damascus, and Turkish authorities have asked that airplane to land on Esenboğa airport in Ankara. And then Turkish authorities have started a search on board, and they have found some pieces saying that those pieces belong to certain explosives. And there was a huge discussion if Turkey is allowed to do that or not. So the answer is in the law of air, of course. Or normally, if you take your car with you and start a trip starting from Bulgaria, Greece, you'll be going over many borders, right? Then you need certain permissions, visas, and so on. And imagine, from Ankara, you're flying to London. Over how many borders do you go across? Depending upon the route, of course. And do you take permissions one by one? How is that regulated then? Is another question. Well, first of all, since 1919, we have that claim related to airspace, national airspace. It's something related to technological advancements, of course, and the nations claim their airspaces on a legal basis since 1919. Paris Convention. And since then, national airspace covers the air above the territory and the territorial waters as well. So it's a huge block of air above the state and its territorial waters. Just like the sea zones, we also have some air zones. They're known as national airspaces and international airspaces. And those two air zones are bound by two different regimes. We have told already where the national airspace is about the terrestrial and fluvial territories of the nations. And the nation has full sovereign rights over its airspaces. International airspace is the area zone above the high seas, above international waters, above continental shelves, above exclusive economic zones, and so on. We can talk about an innocent passage right in territorial waters. We cannot mention such a right for air. All flying objects are expected to ask for authorization before they enter into the airspace of each other. What if they don't? What can happen? They're perceived as a threat, of course. Definitely, they can be downed. And this is not the case for international airspace. International airspace is just like high seas, open for the utility of entire nations. The thing is that freedom doesn't mean that whoever wants which road to take, they can take whichever they want. That would lead to accidents, of course. Therefore, they follow certain paths. But this is not a restriction. This is a security measure. So all nations can benefit equally from international airspaces. I've given you a case recently saying that an airplane starting from Moscow was going to Damascus and it was supposed to land in Ankara for being searched. So if this is possible or not was a huge question. The answer was actually in Chicago Convention of 1944. The Chicago Convention is a treaty which regulates international civil aviation. And International Civil Aviation Organization is an international organization that's based in Canada. By this treaty, this organization is established. Well, this is about civil aviation, airplanes, and so on. And as passengers, when you take a Turkish Airlines flight starting from Turkey, and that's an international flight, then if you read your ticket in a detailed manner, perhaps you can see that as a passenger, you're also subject to a treaty. This is known as the Warsaw Treaty that regulates the passengers and the extra weight they're allowed to carry and so on. So, in that sense, we have mentioned commercial airplanes. The airplanes that we are using, or cargo airplanes, are commercial airplanes. Personal jets, private jets are commercial airplanes. Airplanes are categorized just like ships are categorized in the law of seas. They're known as warplanes and commercial airplanes. So, fighter aircraft or military aircraft and commercial airplanes. Chicago Convention is only for commercial, that's for civil aviation. Therefore, it only covers the commercial flights. And according to Chicago Convention, the commercial flights are also studied under two different categories: the scheduled ones and non-scheduled ones. Scheduled ones are those that we take actually regularly by Turkish Airlines. How is that so? They have already, companies have already booked their flights starting from one airport to another. Therefore, it's scheduled. And non-scheduled ones are if you have a private jet, then you decide when you're going to fly. The thing is that this one also requires many permissions. Here, in scheduled flights, the permissions are already taken in beforehand. In scheduled flights, where the plane starts is known. Where it's going to land is known, and when is also known. When it's going to start and when it's going to land. If it's a passenger aircraft or if it's a cargo aircraft. As I told you, in passenger planes, in cargo planes, all those permissions are taken in beforehand. So airplanes, commercial ones, are not flying without giving any notice, prior notice to the states that they fly above. They're already taken. This is important. And in between national airspaces, we can talk about air corridors. And the states decide upon their air corridors, where they are, how many of they are, and in between which territories are they, are known. In those air corridors, we come across with flight information regions that once an aircraft is passing through that piece of air, if they come across with a hurricane, a group of birds, UFO, whatever, they of course save this information for the next coming plane. Therefore, they have to share information for, first of all, security reasons. Therefore, for storms and so on, in the air, those air corridors and flight information regions are highly vital. And they are designed by the states, by the treaties in between states, decisions of the states. So this is a part of international relations. Those air corridors are starting from the end of national air corridors, okay? So it's in the international airspace. And after air corridor comes to an end, national airspace starts. So there is no innocent passage right. National airspace is completely closed to unnoticed or non-permitted flights, or flights have to ask for authorization, and they're definitely 100% close to all fighter jets and military airplanes. Why so? Yes?
And those warplanes can either bomb that state or another state going through that state.
Definitely, that's why. That's purely for security reasons, defense reasons, security concerns. Yes?
Do scheduled flight also ask for permission, for example, in some, like Europe, Schengen area? Because
they ask it in beforehand. At the moment, all those flight plans are done in 2 or 1 years in advance. Therefore, it's important if the states are going to have their daylight saving plans or what, because it's quite related to how they plan. So they ask for permission in beforehand, 1 year before those flights are realized.
So I told, like, since Schengen area is, like, Europe is kind of one country.
Airspace is something quite sensitive. Okay. Whatever enters to airspace is perceived by the radars. And we don't have a European army, for instance. There are national armies, and they're in charge of their own airspaces. Therefore, it is necessary. And you know what? What we know is that where does airspace start is from the territory, right? From the bottom. Where does it end? It does not end. It ends somewhere. In the stratosphere. The thing is that, where is stratosphere? Because its thickness is changing. Therefore, it is not well clarified. How many kilometers does that make? We don't know it. And it is a problem. First of all, the states are expected to have powerful radars to find out who is flying above their national airspace. Secondly, I guess we don't have enough time for that, but we can do it in our next class. I can show you some footages in which airplanes are doing their stratosphere flights. So there are numerous airplanes like that, and they can fly so high above, which cannot be determined, which cannot be noticed by radars. security problems once again. We move to regime of outer space in our next class. I guess we can stop here. Do you have any questions? If not, you can enjoy the rest of your day.